When former President Barack Obama spots an elderly woman struggling with grocery bags on a rundown street in his hometown of Chicago, he has no idea his life is about to change forever. The woman is Mrs. Margaret Thompson, his sixth-grade teacher who once encouraged him when he was just a mixed-race kid trying to find his place in the world. Now she's living in poverty, choosing between medicine and food on her small teacher pension. What begins as a simple act of kindness becomes much more as Barack uncovers a nationwide crisis, thousands of retired teachers living in poverty after dedicating their lives to educating others. Barack's response will grow into something far bigger than anyone imagined, culminating in a billion-dollar initiative that stuns the world and changes how America values its educators. But the most shocking revelation is still to come: a secret Mrs. Thompson has kept for decades that connects directly to Barack's rise to the presidency. Barack Obama tapped his fingers on the steering wheel of his black sedan. The GPS voice told him to turn left, guiding him through a part of Chicago's South Side he barely recognized anymore. Tall condominiums had replaced some of the old shops he remembered from his childhood. But as he drove further from downtown, the fancy developments disappeared. The streets got narrower. The houses looked tired. He was supposed to be looking at spots for a new community center his foundation wanted to build. Something special for kids in his old neighborhood, but his mind kept drifting to the speech he had to give later that day. "Recalculating," said the GPS voice when he missed a turn. Barack sighed and slowed down at a red light. Through his tinted windows, he watched people walking by, a young mom pushing a stroller, two teenage boys laughing over something on a phone, and then he noticed an elderly woman struggling with several grocery bags. Something about her seemed familiar, the way she walked. Maybe. The light was still red as he watched her shift the heavy bags from one hand to the other. She wore a faded purple coat that had seen better days, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, but wisps had escaped in the wind. The woman stopped to catch her breath. One of her grocery bags ripped suddenly, sending cans rolling across the sidewalk. An apple bounced into the street. Without thinking, Barack pulled his car to the curb. The light had turned green and cars behind him honked in anger, but he ignored them. He stepped out into the chilly February air and jogged toward the woman. "Let me help you with that, ma'am," he said, bending down to gather the spilled groceries. "Oh, thank you, young man. These old hands don't grip like they used to," she said without looking up. Barack collected the cans of soup and vegetables, placing them carefully in his large hands. The woman finally glanced up at him, and her eyes widened with recognition. "My goodness," she whispered. "Barack? Barack Obama?" He looked at her more closely now, and something clicked in his memory: the kind eyes, the gentle smile, the way she tilted her head slightly when she spoke. "Mrs. Thompson?" he asked in disbelief. "Mrs. Margaret Thompson?" She nodded, her weathered face breaking into a wide smile. "I can't believe it's you, after all these years." Barack stood still, memories flooding back. Mrs. Thompson had been his sixth-grade teacher at Punahou Elementary School in Hawaii. She was the teacher who had stayed after school to help him with writing when words jumbled in his young mind. She was the one who had written him that encouraging note when other kids made fun of his unusual name and mixed heritage. "Mrs. Thompson," he repeated, shaking his head in amazement. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Oh, I live just down the block now, in the Riverside Apartments." She gestured toward a rundown brick building with peeling paint and rusty fire escapes. Barack frowned. Riverside Apartments was not a place anyone would choose to live if they had options. The building had been old when he was a community organizer. Now it looked downright dangerous. "I've got my car right here," he said, pointing to his sedan. "Can I give you a ride home? These bags look heavy." Mrs. Thompson hesitated. "I don't want to be a bother." "It's no bother at all," Barack insisted. He gathered the rest of her groceries and guided her to his car. The contrast between his vehicle and her worn clothes made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't quite name. As they drove the short distance to her apartment building, Mrs. Thompson asked about his family, his post-presidency work, and his foundation. Not once did she mention his political career, which somehow meant more to him than if she had gushed about his achievements. "Here we are," she said when they reached the building. Barack parked and insisted on carrying her groceries up to her apartment. The elevator was broken, so they climbed 3 flights of stairs slowly. He pretended not to notice how she had to stop to catch her breath between floors. Her apartment was small but spotlessly clean. Faded curtains hung at the windows, and the furniture looked like it belonged to another decade. But there were books everywhere, stacked on tables. lined up on homemade shelves, piled beside a worn armchair. "Would you like some tea?" she asked, as if a former president stopped by her apartment every day. "I'd love some," Barack said, even though he preferred coffee. He noticed a leak in the corner of the ceiling, a bucket placed underneath to catch drips. As Mrs. Thompson busied herself in the tiny kitchen, Barack noticed a framed photo on a side table. It showed a much younger Mrs. Thompson standing with a group of students. With a jolt, he recognized his 12-year-old self in the back row, all awkward limbs and bright smile. "You kept this all these years?" he asked when she returned with 2 steaming mugs. "Of course I did," she said, sitting down carefully in an armchair with worn cushions. "That was my favorite class. So many bright minds." "How long did you teach?" Barack asked. 42 years altogether," she said proudly, "retired about 6 years ago." Something didn't add up. A teacher with 42 years of service should be living comfortably in retirement, not in a building with broken elevators and leaky ceilings. "Mrs. Thompson," he began carefully, "are you doing okay? I mean, financially and everything?" Her smile dimmed, and she looked down at her tea. "Well, I get by, Barack. Things got a bit difficult after Robert, my husband, passed away. The medical bills, you know, and our house." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "But that's enough about me. Tell me what brings you back to Chicago." Barack explained about the community center his foundation wanted to build, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Thompson's situation. This woman who had shaped so many young lives, including his own, was living in near poverty. It felt deeply wrong. As they chatted about old times and mutual acquaintances, Barack made a silent promise to himself. He didn't know exactly what he would do, but he knew he had to help. Mrs. Thompson had believed in him when he was just a kid with dreams. Now it was his turn to do something for her. When he finally said goodbye an hour later, he had her phone number programmed into his cell phone and a plan forming in his mind. "It was so wonderful to see you, Barack," Mrs. Thompson said, standing in her doorway. "You've made an old teacher very happy today." "The pleasure was mine," he replied, meaning it more than she could know. "And Mrs. Thompson, I'll be in touch soon." As he drove away, Barack pulled out his phone and dialed his chief of staff. "Sarah," he said the moment the call connected, "cancel my meetings tomorrow. Something important has come up." "But sir, the foundation board meeting." "Reschedule it," Barack said firmly. "This can't wait." He hung up before Sarah could argue further. Barack wasn't used to explaining himself, and he didn't feel like starting now. His mind was racing with questions about Mrs. Thompson's situation. The next morning, Barack sent a text message to Mrs. Thompson asking if she'd join him for breakfast. Her reply came quickly with a polite suggestion for IHOP on State Street. Barack chuckled to himself. He had been planning to invite her to the 5-star restaurant in his hotel, but IHOP would work just fine. When he pulled into the parking lot, Mrs. Thompson was already waiting outside, wearing the same purple coat from yesterday but with a colorful scarf around her neck. She looked smaller in the daylight, more fragile. "Good morning, Barack," she said with a bright smile. "I hope I didn't mess up your schedule." "Not at all," he assured her, holding the door open. "I'm glad you could meet me." Inside, they slid into a booth near the back. A young waitress approached, looking tired until she recognized Barack. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my gosh, you're just a man having breakfast with his teacher," Barack said gently. "Could we get some coffee, please?" After they ordered pancakes for Barack, oatmeal for Mrs. Thompson, he leaned forward. "Mrs. Thompson, I hope you don't mind me asking, but I can't stop thinking about your situation. What happened after you retired?" She stirred her coffee slowly, as if gathering her thoughts. "It's not a very exciting story," she said finally. "I taught for 42 years, loved every minute of it. Well, most minutes." She smiled. "Robert and I had a nice little house in Evanston. We had plans to travel after I retired." Her smile faded. "Then Robert got sick. Alzheimer's. He fought it for 4 years, but..." She shook her head. "The insurance covered some things, but not everything. Memory care facilities, specialized treatments, home modifications, it adds up faster than you can imagine." Barack nodded, listening intently. "We had savings, of course, but it wasn't enough. We had to take out a second mortgage on the house. After Robert passed, I couldn't keep up with the payments on just my pension. Mrs. Thompson looked out the window. I sold the house about a year ago, found the apartment. It's not much, but it's what I can afford. What about family? Barack asked. Children? We weren't blessed that way, she said simply. I had my students, thousands of them over the years. That was enough for us. Their food arrived, creating a brief pause in the conversation. Barack watched as Mrs. Thompson carefully cut her oatmeal into smaller portions, as if making it last longer. How much is your pension? He asked directly. Mrs. Thompson looked uncomfortable. That's not something I usually discuss. I understand, Barack said quickly. I'm sorry if that was too personal. She sighed. No, it's all right. It's about $1,800 a month. After rent, utilities, and my medications, there's not much left. Some months I have to choose between filling all my prescriptions or buying groceries. Barack felt a wave of anger. This woman had shaped young minds for 4 decades, and this was her reward? Why didn't you apply for assistance programs? Oh, I did, she said. I get some help with the heating bill in winter, but I don't qualify for much else. My pension puts me just above the cutoff for most programs. She smiled ruefully. Too poor to live comfortably, too rich for help. What about the teachers' union retirement benefits? Our state's teacher retirement system isn't the best, she explained. And I started teaching before some of the better protections were put in place. Bad timing, I suppose. Barack shook his head in disbelief. It's not right, after everything you've done. Now don't you worry about me, Mrs. Thompson said firmly. I've had a good life, better than many. I got to do work that mattered. She reached across the table and patted his hand. I got to teach wonderful children who grew into amazing adults. That's worth more than money. But Barack wasn't convinced. Tell me about your apartment. That ceiling leak, how long has that been happening? Oh, a few months now. The building manager says he'll fix it, but they're short-staffed. She waved a hand dismissively. It's just a little water. And the elevator? Broken more often than not. The stairs are good exercise for these old bones, she chuckled. But Barack didn't smile. What about your health? You mentioned medications. Mrs. Thompson looked down at her half-eaten oatmeal. Just the usual things for someone my age. Blood pressure, arthritis, diabetes that needs monitoring. She brightened suddenly. But enough about all that. Tell me about you. I followed your career, you know. I still have all the newspaper clippings. You kept articles about me? Barack asked, touched. Of course I did. Every speech, every election, every major moment. I have scrapbooks full. Her eyes sparkled with pride. I used to tell my students I taught Barack Obama, you know. Not politics, he figured that out himself, but I taught him how to organize his thoughts on paper. Despite his concerns, Barack laughed. You taught me more than writing, Mrs. Thompson. Call me Margaret, please. You're not in 6th grade anymore. Barack shook his head. I don't think I can. You'll always be Mrs. Thompson to me. They spent the next hour talking about old classmates and teachers. Mrs. Thompson remembered details about students from 30 years ago as if she'd seen them yesterday. She asked about his daughters, his marriage, his post-presidency plans. She knew about his books, his Netflix deal, his foundation work. I watched every major speech, she said. Sometimes I had to go to a community center to see them on the big screen. The other teachers thought I was crazy, this old lady cheering at the TV. As they finished breakfast, Barack noticed Mrs. Thompson had wrapped half her toast in a napkin and slipped it into her purse when she thought he wasn't looking. The sight made his chest tighten. Let me drive you home, he offered when they finished. Thank you, but I need to stop at the pharmacy first, she said. It's my day to pick up medications. I'll take you there too. At the pharmacy, Barack waited in the car to give her privacy. Through the window, he saw her talking to the pharmacist, who was shaking his head. Mrs. Thompson dug through her purse, counting out bills. When she returned to the car, her expression was carefully neutral, but Barack noticed she was carrying a smaller bag than he expected. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just fine," she said brightly. "They were out of one of my prescriptions. They'll have it next week." Barack wasn't fooled, but he didn't press the issue. After he dropped her off at her apartment, promising to stay in touch, he sat in his car for a long time. The contrast between his life and hers was stark. He thought about the mansion he owned, the Secret Service protection, the millions in his bank accounts, and then he thought about Mrs. Thompson counting dollar bills at the pharmacy counter. He picked up his phone and called Sarah again. "I need you to set up a meeting," Barack said. "Start researching everything you can about teacher pensions and retirement benefits, and find me the best elder care attorney in Illinois." "What's this about, sir?" Sarah asked. Barack stared up at the decaying apartment building where his former teacher now lived. "It's about doing what's right," he said, "and it starts today." Over the next week, Barack immersed himself in research. He read academic papers, government reports, and news articles about teacher retirement systems across America. The more he learned, the more passionate he became about addressing the issue. Meanwhile, he quietly arranged for Mrs. Thompson to receive help through what appeared to be a state program for retired educators, a beautiful house near her old neighborhood, renovations for accessibility, and a trust fund to cover all her expenses, all delivered through anonymous channels that preserved her dignity. When Mrs. Thompson called to tell him about her good fortune, her voice was filled with joy and disbelief. "I qualified for some special program," she said. "They're giving me a house, Barack, a real house with a garden where I can grow roses again." Barack smiled, listening to her excitement. "That's wonderful, Mrs. Thompson. You deserve every bit of happiness." But helping one teacher wasn't enough. Barack's research had revealed a nationwide crisis, thousands of retired educators living in poverty after dedicating their lives to education. Some states provided pensions below the poverty line. Many teachers weren't eligible for Social Security benefits. He began assembling a team of experts, education policy specialists, pension analysts, former government officials who understood the system. His goal was ambitious: create a foundation that would not only help individual teachers but advocate for systemic change in how America treated its retired educators. The project grew beyond anything Barack had initially imagined. Other celebrities and business leaders joined the cause, each bringing their own stories about teachers who had changed their lives. The foundation secured partnerships with state governments, teacher unions, and advocacy groups. 6 months after that chance encounter on a Chicago street, Barack stood before a packed auditorium to announce the Teachers Legacy Foundation, a billion-dollar initiative dedicated to supporting retired educators and reforming pension systems nationwide. "Every one of us has been shaped by a teacher," he told the audience. "They plant seeds in our minds that grow into our dreams, our achievements, our contributions to society. It's time we honored that debt." In the front row sat Mrs. Thompson, tears streaming down her face as she listened to her former student now speaking as a man who would change the lives of thousands of teachers across America. The foundation's work was just beginning, but already hundreds of retired teachers had received support. More importantly, the public conversation about education had shifted. Americans were beginning to understand that valuing teachers meant ensuring their dignity in retirement. As Barack concluded his speech, he caught Mrs. Thompson's eye and smiled. She had taught him that words have power, that one person can make a difference, that believing in others creates possibilities they never imagined. Now, thanks to a chance encounter and a teacher's lifelong lesson about caring for others, thousands of educators would receive the respect and support they had always deserved. The circle was complete, but the impact would last for generations.